Shadow stands rigid at the edge of the walkway, his breath rising in sharp, steady bursts that ripple through the cool evening air. The quiet neighborhood lies still around him, yet something within him thrums with fierce certainty, a warning pulsing. Through every muscle, Mark watches the dog with a tightening unease, because Shadow is never wrong when he senses danger, and the way his ears are locked forward tells Mark that something inside the house ahead is not simply unusual, but deeply wrong. In a way he cannot yet name, Shadow takes one cautious step, then another, pulling against the leash with growing urgency. Each movement fueled by an instinct older and sharper than any human training, and Mark feels the weight of something unseen. Pressing closer as he follows the dog toward the porch and the silent doorway, waiting like an unanswered question. As they near the steps, Mark hears a faint sound carried on the still air, a low rhythm. Like breathing, strained and uneven. Shadow reacts instantly, lunging forward with a soft rumble in his throat, the tension in his body rising with every second. Mark tries to steady him, but the dog refuses to slow his paws, scraping against the porch as though he can feel something through the wooden boards, something hidden just beneath the surface. Hannah appears at the door, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, her face pale in the fading light. Her voice barely above a whisper as she tells them she is fine. Yet her eyes flicker with something else, something she is trying to ignore, or perhaps something she cannot fully understand. Shadow's gaze locks onto her with fierce intensity, his body rigid as he circles her once, twice, each pass more frantic than the last, as if he is trying to place himself between her and an unseen threat. Mark steps closer, trying to calm the moment, though his own nerves hum with quiet tension. He asks Hannah if she is feeling well, and she nods, though the way her hand tightens around her belly betrays a heaviness within her, a weight she is trying to carry alone. Her breathing is slow but uneven, and her skin glistens faintly with sweat, despite the coolness of the evening. Shadow senses this to his movements, shifting from protective to urgent as he nudges her leg, whining softly yet insistently. Hannah laughs nervously, rushing him away, telling him she is simply tired. But her voice wavers and her steps falter, sending a ripple of unease through Mark, who now feels certain that Shadow is responding to something real, something he cannot yet see. Shadow's tail stiffens, his muscles tighten, and his eyes dart past her into the dark hallway behind her, as though he senses that something deeper inside the house is calling out to him, a signal silent to human ears. Hannah tries to step back into the house, perhaps to prove she is fine, perhaps because she suddenly feels a wave of dizziness that she cannot hide. Shadow instantly leaps into her path, blocking her with his chest, his paws braced against the floor as he releases a low, warning growl. Mark, startled by the sudden shift, pulls on the leash, but Shadow refuses to move, his body pressed forward with fierce determination. Hannah hesitates, gripping the doorframe as though the ground beneath her has begun to tilt, her face drawn tight as a flicker of fear crosses her eyes. Mark sees it, that tiny crack in her calm, and he knows something is terribly wrong, but he still cannot grasp what Shadow has already sensed. Hannah starts to speak, her voice faint and fragile, but the words break off as she winces, her hand clutching her stomach as though a sharp pain has pierced through her. Mark reaches forward, offering support, but Shadow moves faster, placing himself beside her again, his body trembling now with the force of whatever instinct drives him. He looks up at Mark, eyes wide, bright, almost pleading, as if urging him to understand that there is no time left to question, only time to act. Hannah leans against the doorframe, her breath catching in shallow gasps, and Mark feels a surge of helplessness rising inside him, because he can see she is in distress, yet he cannot determine the source, her expression twisting with a mix of confusion, pain and fear. The evening air grows heavier around them, a thick silence settling in over the porch, broken only by Shadow's urgent breaths and Hannah's uneven gasps. Mark steps closer, his hand hovering near her shoulder, unsure whether to help her. Sit or call for immediate backup, but before he can decide, Hannah sags forward, her knees bending as though something inside her is pulling her downward. Shadow leaps to catch her weight, nuzzling under her arm, giving a desperate whine that sends a chill down Mark's spine. He realizes then that Shadow had sensed this moment long before either of them could see it, a warning crying out through every bark and movement, and suddenly, Mark knows he must act fast, though the true danger still hides just out of reach, waiting in the darkness inside the house where Hannah had been trying so hard not to look, and where Shadow continues to stare with unshakable dread, leaving Mark on the edge of a truth he is not yet ready to face. Mark feels Hannah slipping from consciousness, her weight collapsing into his arms as Shadow circles them in frantic arcs, his movements sharp and restless, as though he is racing against something neither of them can see. The night air thickens around them, carrying a strange heaviness that presses into Mark's chest, making every breath feel tighter, and every second feels slower. Mark lowers Hannah carefully onto the porch, her eyes fluttering open just long enough to reveal a flicker of fear before they close. Again her breaths come in shallow bursts, each one softer than the last, and Shadow stands above her, his body tense, his gaze riveted on her stomach, as though the danger he senses is pulsing from within. Mark fumbles for his radio, his hands trembling as he calls for emergency assistance, but his voice feels distant even to himself, drowned out by the relentless pounding of his heartbeat. Shadow paces beside him, his paws tapping an anxious rhythm against the porch boards as if counting down the moments left. Mark tries to speak to Hannah, urging her to stay awake, but she drifts further away, her breaths growing faint and fragile like fading echoes of a warning she had tried to hide for far too long. He can feel the urgency rising around them like a wave ready to break, and he lifts her carefully into his arms, knowing he must reach the patrol car and get her help before whatever is happening reaches its final and irreversible point. Shadow bolts ahead, guiding him along the walkway with desperate intent, his entire body moving like a compass locked onto a single direction. Mark hurries after him, each step heavier than the last, as if the ground itself is trying to pull him back. The wind stirs through the trees, carrying with it a whisper of dread, a sense that time is thinning, stretching out toward an end he cannot yet see. Hannah's head rests against his shoulder, her breaths now barely perceptible, and Mark feels a chill slide through him as he realizes how quickly her strength is slipping away. Shadow stops suddenly in front of the patrol car, his body rigid, his eyes locked onto something distant, something unseen that makes his fur rise like crackling electricity. Mark pulls open the back door and gently lays Hannah inside her body, limp, her skin cool beneath his hands. His pulse quickens as he leans close, trying to hear her breathing, and Shadow stands at the open door, his nose pressed to her arm as if willing her to keep holding on. Mark reaches for the steering wheel, preparing to speed toward the hospital when a sudden stillness fills the air, a hush so deep it drowns out everything else. He looks down at Hannah, and for a moment she seems suspended between two worlds, her chest rising only slightly, then pausing, as though deciding whether to rise again. Shadow steps back slowly, his eyes fixed not on Hannah now, but on the dark horizon beyond the street, his body trembling with the knowledge he has carried since the moment he first barked. At the door, Mark watches him, his stomach tightening with dread, because Shadow has never reacted like this, unless the truth awaiting them is darker than anything Mark is ready to face. And as the engine rumbles to life, Mark feels the world closing in around him with the weight of a revelation he fears has already come too late to stop.